Pretty Girl Club. Welcome back to the Decentering Men series. I'm not sure if I'm going to put this on the YouTube or on the Patreon, but if I end up sharing this on my YouTube channel, be sure to join my Patreon. That is actually where I'm the most consistent. That's where I have the most in-depth content. So that is going to be linked in the description. But I want to talk about some of the ways that men actually hit the wall, because you hear a lot of people talking about women hit the wall. Let's talk about men. We will go decade by decade. Let's start off in the 20s. If a man is in his 20s, oftentimes he's already at the wall, because if his childhood was screwed up, let's say he didn't have a father figure, let's say he wasn't set up for success, maybe he didn't get into college, he doesn't know what he wants to do with his life, he's emotionally immature. He still has traumas from high school or college, maybe he was bullied. So he doesn't have a solid identity yet. That is actually going to serve as a roadblock when it comes to that man getting into strong, healthy, long-term relationships. So a man in his 20s, oftentimes he hasn't had enough time to build himself up in terms of money, first of all. That's one of the main things that women are looking for when they're looking for a man to deal with. Even if they're just having casual sex or going on casual dates or whatever, oftentimes women are not looking for the brokest, most dusty man to do that with. No, usually they're looking for a man who has some attractive qualities. So men in their 20s, sometimes they're starting off at the wall because they don't even have any attractive qualities yet. They haven't developed anything yet. They don't have any personality yet. They don't know how to speak to a woman. They definitely don't have conflict resolution skills. Some of them still resort to immature tactics, such as fighting and violence. A lot of younger men, you'll see these guys are the most likely to be fighting at the bar, fighting at clubs. They're doing this outlandish stuff because a lot of them have not even outgrown that high school mindset. I'm in my early 30s, and if a man tries to approach me and he's like, 27, 28, 29, I unfortunately do attract a lot of guys in their late 20s. Generally speaking, it's very difficult to take these types of men seriously because you're still in your 20s. So the stereotype of men in their 20s is that they're just hoes, basically. They're sleeping around with everyone. So that's going to serve as a wall when it comes to the men who are trying to get into relationships with women. You guys know my theory on this. Men want women way more than women want men. Men are obsessed with us. They're more desperate for us than we are for them. And that's why they're so obsessed with who are women picking? Who are we sleeping with? Who are the 304s with? They're so obsessed with what we're doing with our bodies. Because my theory is that generally speaking, they do tend to be more emotionally codependent. A lot of men, a lot of young boys, they're not raised to learn how to process their emotions. So oftentimes men will seek companionship with women. Sex is still a form of companionship, even though it's a cheaper version of it. They're still seeking some form of companionship, whether it's him wanting to be your pen pal through a dating app. He's still seeking a virtual companionship. Maybe he just wants to have a quote-unquote friend. You guys know my theory on men who have quote-unquote friends. You're not a friend at all. He's extracting emotional labor from you most of the time. You're operating as his free cheerleader. You're serving as his pen pal. So whenever he's bored or whenever he's been rejected by the woman he's pursuing for dating, he goes back to his female friends, and then, he will text them for kind of like a boost to his ego. So you're serving as his ego maintenance machine. So a lot of men in their 20s, they haven't had time to really develop their sense of self yet. And so that's a version of them hitting the wall. A lot of them are starting off at the wall. And don't even get me started on race and color and height and appearances. Don't even get me started on stuff like that, because that's a whole other version of the wall. Because a lot of men, they're going all the way into their 20s. They still don't know how to do proper hygiene. They don't know when to put on deodorant, for God's sakes. They're brushing their teeth once a week. So a lot of men in their 20s, they're just now figuring out how to get a hygiene routine. Most of these men don't even have a skincare routine. They're walking around, their nose is all oily. They've got open pores all over their face, oil and pus coming out of their skin. They got blackheads everywhere, pimples and shit. So a lot of them are already at the wall because I think there's a stereotype that younger men are more attractive. And it's no, we are women. Okay, this is women you're dealing with here. Women, generally speaking, we're smart enough to know that men that we see in the media, that's not the representation of the average man. Okay, so every man in his 20s, he's not walking around looking like a supermodel. We already are smart enough to know that. A lot of men struggle with delusion where they're so overexposed to social media beauty and they're so overexposed to porn to the point where they think that stunning beauties are average. And we obviously are smarter than that as women. So a lot of us women, we're not overexposed to the male image. We're not overexposed to men's attractiveness. So we don't have the same level of thirst that men have. Not to mention the fact that we can be satisfied with not having as much sex or, just being celibate and stuff. So a lot of men in their 20s, if you combine insecurity with codependency and then you combine that with him like not having any good things going for himself, of course you're going to get community dick. That's what's going to come out of that. That's what he's going to serve as because he doesn't have any other role in society. He doesn't have anything that he needs to uphold. Most of the time, men in their 20s, they're just completely screwing up and wasting time. This is where a lot of men, they start experimenting with like drugs. They start experimenting with drinking. They start smoking all the time because maybe they just moved out of their parents' house. So that's a form of them starting off on the wall. They have the audacity to say, oh, well, you guys hit the wall. No, you started off on the wall in your 20s, Tyrell. For a lot of men, their 20s, that's when they take a lot of big risks. So they're doing all this high risk behavior. This is where you'll see a lot of young men, they're taking out loans that they can't afford to pay back. This is where a lot of men are making their first financial mistakes, okay? This is the first time his car is getting repoed. This is the first time he's getting evicted. I call the 20s the fuck around and find out era for most men, okay? This is his first time cheating on somebody. Then he gets his car windows smashed. This is his first time getting into a physical fight with his girlfriend. Now he's got a DV charge. First time getting caught committing a crime. He's actually being charged as an adult. And let's be realistic here, because a lot of women, they try to say things like, oh, well, Exoticals United, you're probably just talking about black men. We're divesting. We're hypergamous. We're only dating old, rich, white men. No, you're not. You're dating one of the 87% of men who makes less than 100K per year by the time he's in his 40s. So that's who I'm talking about. I'm talking about the average man that you're going to see walking down the street. I don't care what color he is. But most likely, he's not going to be a multimillionaire, and especially not in his 20s, for God's sakes. So that's why I say, for a lot of men, they're starting out at the wall. They don't even know how to take care of their hygiene properly. So this is when a lot of men, they're dealing with health issues. He's got hella cavities and shit. Hairline's fucked up, dandruff everywhere. His hair's all greasy and oily from him not washing it. He's getting infections. He's getting skin infections. He's got body acne. These are all very common things that happen with men in their 20s. Number 2 is laziness. A lot of men in their 20s, from 20 to 29, a lot of them feel like they've got plenty of time. Like they're so invincible. So they're like, oh, you know what? I can wait on getting a girlfriend. I can wait on marriage. I can put everything off. It's okay. I can spend up all my money now. I can max out all my credit cards. No big deal. So they're under this illusion that they're invincible. They're under this illusion that they're always going to look how they look today. And us women, we're actually not dumb. We're smarter than that. Because a lot of us women, especially pretty privileged women, those of us here on the Exotical channels, we have been told from the time we were young, hey, one day you're going to get older. You're not going to look like how you look today. So a lot of people have used that as a fear-mongering tactic. But at the same time, it helps us to stay on our shit. Because we know that if we don't take care of ourselves in our 20s, that we're going to look like trash in our 30s, 40s, and 50s. A lot of men are not told this because men often tend to be emotionally neglected by their parents. So mothers and fathers, a lot of times they have absent fathers. This is not just in the black community. This is also in non-black communities. Let's look at divorce rates. If the divorce rate is already like 50%, that means that 50% of young boys are growing up in a broken household, regardless of their color. But a lot of men in their 20s, they're not taking care of their physical health. So they don't have as good of like a sleep schedule or like a meal schedule. So they're going to often struggle with codependency. Okay, that's a form of him already starting off at the wall. It's hilarious how people say, well, you hit the wall. Women are only in their prime in their 20s. Okay, so then thank you for admitting that women are in their primes and that men are beneath them socially. Number 3. Men start having romantic ego bruises in their 20s. So if he is the type of guy where he was not popular in high school, he wasn't popular in college, if he realizes that he is not conventionally attractive or that he doesn't have social skills, If he is a man that is a part of a disparaged group, if he feels invisible in terms of like the media representation and stuff, that's when a lot of these men start realizing this. And they're like, oh, wait, I'm 25 and, I'm short and fat and I already have gray hair or I'm already balding. Like, oh, crap, I'm not going to be considered a prize as time goes on. So that's when a lot of their core ego bruises start coming in. Meanwhile, for us women, a lot of us, when we're in our 20s, we've got men hitting on us, trying to take us on boats and stuff, trying to pay for us, trying to give us like this sugar baby type of lifestyle. Because like I said, men want women way more than women want men. And believe it or not, men are still chasing after women even as those women age. But a lot of people only focus on women hitting the quote unquote wall. Oftentimes a woman hitting the wall is tied to a man. But a man hitting the wall, a lot of men start off on the wall. They're already at a financial wall. Let's talk about the men who do not invest time and money into their education. So let's say, okay, so the divorce rate is 50%. So there's a 50% chance that this young man is coming from a single parent home. How likely do you think it is that his single parent can pay for a prestigious university tuition? How likely do you think that is? It's not very likely. And even if he does go to a prestigious university and he finishes college, oftentimes he's going to come out with a lot of debt. That's another thing that a lot of men in their 20s deal with. He has accrued his first major debt. Sometimes it's student loan debt. Sometimes it's business debt. Maybe he wanted to open up a restaurant or something, or he opened up a food truck and then it failed. His first business flopped. Or maybe he was lucky enough to come into some money, but he decided to blow all his money at the strip club in Vegas. This is when a lot of men are doing these high-risk behaviors. This is when a lot of young men, if they do come into some money, they're more likely to waste it. They're more likely to waste their money on frivolous things. Going out to eat, stopping at the gas station, getting black and miles, spending money on weed, spending money on alcohol and bottles, and showing off and, getting all this stuff for your car detailing. I mean, I've seen men be obsessed with their cars. They're getting all the newest rims, all the newest lighting, all the speakers. They're paying tens of thousands of dollars to kind of like deck out their vehicles. And then later on, that same vehicle gets repossessed. This is when you see them trying to purchase like Teslas and Dodge Chargers and fancy Cadillacs. They're purchasing all these cars so they can try to come off like they're rich. This is when a lot of them are spending time trying to look rich. But society knows, okay, dude, you're 23. We know that you're not rich. Okay, so that's an example of men hitting the wall. Let's get into the 30s. The 30s, that is the reality check era for a lot of men. That's when that hairline starts receding. The same hair that they talk shit about on black women. Oh yeah, their hair is actually bald-headed. Their edges are being ripped out from wearing so many baseball caps and trucker hats. They're getting those grays coming into their beard. That's when their beard starts looking patchy. As a matter of fact, let's talk about beards. In the 30s, that's when that beer belly starts coming in. That's when his double chin first starts coming in, eating all those ham hocks and chicken wings and collard greens and turkey necks, mac and cheese. That's when the face starts swelling up a little bit. So then he starts saying, oh, you know what? Let me grow out my beard. So he starts spending hundreds of dollars a month on beard oil. And then the beard oil is making his skin break out. So now he's got his chin looking like a Nestle Crunch bar. He's got pimples on his chin. He's got ingrown hairs on his cheeks. It's looking uneven. The beard is scraggly. It's looking gray. But he's got to keep growing out the beard so he can cover up the double chin. That's what he's doing. So have you ever seen those guys with a gigantic beard? Yeah, they're hiding the double chin. That's what a lot of them are doing. They don't have the same jawline that they used to have in high school when they were on the football team. They don't have the same supermodel look that they used to have in college. Oh no, that jawline is sagging now. You can't even see that jawline because his cheeks look like two blueberries. So he's looking like a caramel version of Santa Claus. He's looking like a black version of Santa Claus. He's got crinkles coming in on his eyes. That's when reality starts to hit him. That's when all of his bad decisions from his 20s start coming back to bite him a little bit. He's like, oh shit, my credit's messed up. I got my car repossessed. I've got several evictions. on my record now, so I can't even get a nice apartment. So, that's when you start to see the winners and losers begin to separate. And I don't like calling people losers, but I mean, that's how society views them, because you do start to see a really big difference. Once a man is about 30 and above, you can tell who spent their 20s wisely and who didn't. Because the man in his 30s, let's say he screwed up in terms of his finances, he can't live in a nice neighborhood. He can't live in the business district with all of the other young professionals. Oh no, he's got 5 evictions on his record. He's got too much bad debt. He's got a whole bunch of unpaid bills. He can't get approved for certain loans anymore. He can't get approved for things. This is when you also see the difference between the men who went to college and finished college versus the men who didn't. This is when you see which men got a trade in their 20s and then which ones screwed off in their 20s. Which ones were just working at all the bars, who was a club promoter in his 20s. That's when you start to see the difference. The guy who was a club promoter in his 20s, yeah, that might have looked cool back in college, but maybe in your 30s, maybe if he's 37, 38, and he's still standing outside of a club passing out flyers, he doesn't look as cool anymore. He doesn't look the same. So the status doesn't hit the same. So that's when you start to see a separation between upwardly mobile men versus the men who are stagnant, or basically they're at the bottom, in terms of finances. So that's another way that men hit the wall. The ones that screwed off in their 20s, those are the same ones that are trying to catch up with the other men in their 30s. So this is where you see the separation between the college graduates, the ones who got their careers going. You start to see the blue collar men, then you start asking questions like, okay, wait a minute, what kind of blue collar guy is he? What kind of mechanic is he? Does he own a mechanic shop, or is he working at Midas down the street? Is he working at the gas station down the street? So that's when you start seeing a really big socioeconomic gap. And so if he's a man that is at the lower end of that socioeconomic gap, that's going to be a big problem. So that's another way that men hit the wall. The double chin is showing, the beer belly starting to come in. This is also when you see some of them starting to have a kid or two. So, now he's got a baby mama. Maybe he's already been through a couple of divorces, depending on his background, or maybe he's only been through one breakup, or maybe he's only been through one major divorce. But then as a woman, you're questioning him like, wait a minute, why did you get a divorce? Why is your child not in your life? So this is another area where they hit the wall. Their mistakes start to show in their health, in their finances, in their lifestyle. When that man was in his 20s, when he still had his hairline, when he still had that six-pack, when his teeth hadn't started falling out yet from so many cavities, from eating all the candies and nerds and hot Cheetos and all that bullshit he was eating throughout his whole 20s, back when he still had all of his teeth, and back when he still had muscles and a hairline and a nice jawline, oh, that's when he thought he was the prize. He never thought that he would be obese by the time he was 35. He didn't think that his car would get repoed and that he would go from driving a Mercedes to driving a trash can on wheels. Oh no, he thought that he would have been wealthy by now. So that's also when you start to see men getting a little bit of bitterness. This is when you see them going on to these red pill podcasts. They're yelling at women. They're berating women. I think a lot of people, they see my content and they think that I'm trying to devalue men. When I talk about decentering men, I'm just talking about this chart right here. That's all I'm talking about. But have you ever noticed that the men, whenever they make their content, oftentimes there's so much more rage behind their content? Sometimes they'll even come and stalk me over here on my channel, and then they'll leave long paragraph comments. And it's like, dude, if you would have spent that time actually turning in your essays in college, instead of writing essay comments under my videos, you could have been a doctor by now. You could have actually had a career. So this is when the twinge of regret starts to sink in for those men. And this is also when you start hearing men complaining, saying, I thought I'd be settled down by now. I thought I would have a family by now. I thought I'd have a house by now. So this is when reality starts to kick in for him. So that's why I call this the reality check decade. So this is the first time that his dating pool actually shrinks, because maybe in his 20s, he was just chasing any baddie that he could find. Maybe he was just chasing skirts. Maybe he was just sleeping with anybody that would sleep with him. But in his 30s, he starts to rethink that, because he's like, oh shit, I wasted my time. and I got all of my resources taken from me. That's another thing too about men in their 20s. Sometimes cougars, the older women, the cougar women will sometimes go in and manipulate and use up the men in their 20s. And this is still happening to men in their 30s as well. Sometimes the older women will come in, they'll snatch them up. If he's a younger man that happens to have access to like money and resources. So a lot of guys in their 20s, that's their first time getting played. So, maybe they got played. Maybe all their resources are gone. Or now they've got to pay child support to their baby mama. They have to pay alimony to somebody. Or, they got married, they had a house, and maybe they lost 50% of everything that they built with their spouse. Because now, if they were married in their 20s and maybe they got divorced by their early or mid 30s, oftentimes it's because their wife wised up. She started to recognize her worth. So then she left him because she's like, wait a minute, I don't want to be in a 50-50 marriage or like, 70-30, I'm paying the majority of the bills. You're just building off my back. So that woman leaves him. And so that man is left broker than before. His lifestyle is starting to decline for the first time. And this is the first time where it actually becomes visible. Like in my 30s, I can see the difference between the men that I've known from like high school and college. Like there's a vast difference now. Like you meet some men in their 30s who look good for their age, and then you meet some men in their 30s who already look like they're 55. They're stressed out, they have no career set up for themselves, no financial stability. And so this is when you start to see those men actually becoming desperate. Okay, so sometimes you'll see men in their 30s, they're targeting the women in their 20s more. They want to hurry up and try to lock down a woman in her 20s, or maybe he knows he can't do that, so he may try to lock down an older woman, a cougar, because he's looking to ride the coattails of her financial success. Those women in their 50s and 60s, they're kind of like the quote-unquote femcel types of women, and so they have to buy a boyfriend, or they're kind of like, they become a sugar mama. Because I guess whatever man, like the men that they wanted didn't necessarily want them, so then those women lower their standards. So that's what you see starting to happen in the 30s. You'll see some men in their 30s like, oh, wait, no, I don't date younger women. Like in my 30s, that was the first time that I heard men start saying things like, I don't date women in their 20s, or, I don't date women that are my age or younger. I only want an older woman now. Well, yeah, that's because you totally screwed up in your 20s and you're financially fucked. And so now you're looking for an older woman who's like a doctor or something. You're looking for a woman like that to share finances with. So the 30s, that is the reality check era for a lot of men. Okay, so that's another version of them hitting the wall. Their metabolisms are slowing down. If they get hungover, it hits harder. So their lifestyle choices from their 20s start showing. If he's never put on lotion for the past several decades of his life, if he used to be known as Tyrone the Ashy One, well, now this guy's got full-blown eczema. This guy has full-blown dry and cracked skin. Number 5, mental health. This is where men's depression or loneliness seems to peak, especially if they lack close friendships. In your 20s, you got a lot of forced friendships. You're still kind of close with people from high school. Maybe you still live in your hometown, so you still hang out with those people. Maybe you're in college, so you're naturally in closer proximity to a lot of people. But by the time you're in those 30s, 35, 36, 38, those friendships have to be more intentional. So this is when you start to also see the gap between men's social skills versus women. This is also why you'll see a pattern where a lot of men never leave their hometown, especially if he peaked in high school, maybe he peaked in college. These are the types of men that you see kind of lurking in those areas. Have you ever been like in high school and there's like a creepy 30-year-old guy just kind of lurking around there, and he's like an alumni of that high school? Or same thing with college. There's that one 35-year-old guy who claims he's going back to get his doctorate. He claims he's going to get his master's. Maybe he enrolls in one class and then he drops out when he runs out of money. Okay, so these types of guys, these are the ones that peaked in their 20s. And so maybe they, eventually ran out of money. They had to move back to their hometown, or they had to move away. But this is when you see the loneliness, the male loneliness epidemic that they rant about so much, the loneliness epidemic that they caused. That's when you first start to see the mental health effects on these men. So you start to see, wait a minute, who actually was a good friend? Who still has friends in their 30s? Who's good at making friends? Who actually left their hometown and was able to create a life for themselves in a new city with good faithful, loyal, positive, masculine friendships? Not very many. So I would say the 30s, that's really when the cream of the crop starts to separate from everyone else. And when I say cream of the crop, it's really not. I just mean cream of the crop in comparison to Dusties. But that's when you start realizing, wow, a lot of these men were super dusty. So that's a version of the wall. Because the same men that you used to be so attracted to, the same men that you used to pedestalize so much when you were a teenage girl, when you were in your early 20s, whoever your little high school crush was, your little college lover, that same guy, you see him 10 years later, you're like, oh my God, you fell a long way down. That's when they start, I'm telling you, they start getting the obesity at this age. They start having career pressure. So the men who have not found a path yet, that's when you start noticing, oh wow, it's been 10 years since we graduated and you still haven't found a path for yourself. So you're starting from ground zero over and over again. So in the 30s, that's when you start to notice men who are going through the same cycles over and over. So he couldn't pick one thing and stick with it. He didn't know how to build off of one career and then transition into the other successfully. So he kept screwing up. Maybe he burned a lot of bridges. So he has no connections left in his 30s. He has no opportunities left. Maybe he was the type of guy who bites the hand that feeds him. So all the women that were around him when he was younger, all those women that were doing his homework for him in college, all those women that were helping him out, helping him get jobs, all those ex-girlfriends that he had that were sending out applications for him, those people are now gone. And so now he's left with the pressure because he's not measuring up to his peers. He can't compete with the wealthy established men who, maybe they did a better job in their 20s, or maybe they're older. Maybe they had more time to build themselves financially. Number 6, childhood trauma surfaces. This is when unprocessed emotional wounds may begin to interfere with relationships or self-perception. So this is basically when their self-esteem starts to go down. This is also when men start realizing that they are incels. Because they realize, oh shit, I just went a whole decade. I've never had a serious girlfriend. All the women that I've come across, all the women that I flirted with, all the women that showed so much interest in me back in college, those women are all gone now. They've all moved on to someone else. Yeah, that's because women's priorities change. So what we used to think was cool, like being on the football team or being a rapper in high school, we may have thought that was cool back then, but now if you're 39 years old and you're a quote-unquote rapper, but you're still rapping on the side of the street and trying to get people to listen to your mixtape and you never actually made it to the industry, well, yeah, it's not really cool anymore. The allure is gone. Because as women, we tend to become more wise as we get older. So then these men realize, oh shit, I'm actually not as desirable as I thought I was. And then, I thought I could rely on my looks. I thought I could rely on my popularity or my status in school as the head football player or, the popular guy. I thought I could rely on things like that, but I'm not trendy anymore. That's another thing. The trends change. So him being a thug, that might have been cute when he was 18, him being a bad boy. That might have been cute. But now that he's 39 and a bad boy, now he only attracts ratchets and hood boogers. You know those men who complain and say, oh, all the women are so ghetto, they're just weaving and sandaling and they're just, they're so ratchet. No, you, sir, are the ratchet one because that's what you're attracting. So there's something about you that gives ratchet hood booger, and that's why everything you're around is ratchet hood boogers. So in the 30s, that's when you see men becoming very frustrated with their lack of dating options, because that's when men start to realize, wait a minute, my type doesn't want me. I wanted a classy, educated, beautiful, in shape woman. And it's like, well, sir, you are an uneducated, dusty, out of shape man. So of course you're not going to attract your type. And so in the 30s, that's when you start to see men transition over into the passport bro culture, because they're like, wait, I need to get a woman who is poorer than me. I need to get a woman who is more underprivileged than me. So oftentimes these are men who, they suck in the American dating market. No American woman with any self-respect wants those men. So that's when you see them like, okay, let me try to target a woman from another country. Maybe she needs a green card or, she wants to come here. And then in some cases, you'll even see some of them start to flee the country because they're like, look, I'm failing miserably in the American economy. The American economy was not set up for me. I don't have the education. I don't have the credentials. I don't have the phenotype. I don't have the looks. I don't have the skin color. I don't have the race. This is when men start realizing how many isms they are suffering from. They start learning about, things that are going on in America. So some of them will actually get up and leave. They will eliminate themselves from the United States dating market. And they'll be like, fuck it, I got to go to a third world country now where I actually have some status because I don't have any status here. I'm a loser here. So this is where you see some of them uprooting their lives. They have to just go ahead and leave because they can't make it. Basically, they were used to being a big fish in a small pond. And by the time he hits the 30s, he thought he was hot shit in his 20s. Maybe he was. Maybe he was hot shit. But then, that the fat started coming on, that jawline started getting bigger and bigger. He started getting double chins and triple chins and quadruple chins. The hair started graying. The hairline went away. Teeth started falling out because he never took care of his cavities. He never went to the dentist in his teens and 20s. So now it's catching up with him. Never went to the doctor. Now he's got knee problems. So he went from being a young man with potential to just being a man. So once these men hit the 30s decade, women are no longer looking at him for his potential. Like, oh, he's got so much talent. He's got so many dreams. Oh, he's such a smooth talker. No. That shit doesn't fly once the man is in his 30s, because women are like, wait a minute, you've had 35 years to start that business you've been talking about since you were a teenager. Where is it? In the 30s, that's when people start looking for the actual results. That's when these men are applying for jobs and the company is saying, wait a minute, where's your experience? Oh, you don't have any. Where are your credentials? Oh, you don't have any. So that's when, it starts to separate. That's why I say the crop starts to separate. You start to see the difference between men with credentials versus men who don't have the credentials. And that's why some men eliminate themselves and they leave the entire country because they're like, oh shit, let me just go to a country where you don't have to have any credentials. Now let's talk about the 40s, the midlife awakening or crisis. There's a reason why they talk about the midlife crisis, because his body is not bouncing back like it used to. This is the decade where 1 in 4 men start to struggle with things like erectile dysfunction. This is when his bad habits are really starting to settle in. So that little porn addiction he had when he was in his 20s, oh no, that is a full-blown addiction at this point, and it has completely warped his view of women. It has warped his view of himself, and he can't even enjoy real-life smacks anymore because he has spent decades at this point brainwashing himself to only prefer corn. So that's something that happens. Like his mental illness problems, his mental health problems have now had several decades to pile on top of each other. So he has spent decades neglecting his mental health. He has spent decades not learning how to eat properly, not learning how to regulate his emotions. So after the 40s, this is actually when some women start giving up on men altogether. So you might get some women in their early 20s who have been told to date older men, but they will quickly recognize the difference. Women in their 20s, like college age girls, they're still going to know the difference between a 40-year-old multimillionaire and a 40-year-old Dusty. So this is when people really start throwing around the word loser, bum. And this is what I call the regret phase. So some of the men who have married young, maybe they're divorced by now. Some men will have gone through several divorces by this point, because you're in the 40s decade. So 40 to 49. By 49 years old, oh yeah, you got some men where they've got a couple of kids by now. Maybe their kids are grown because they had some kids back in their early 20s or something. So some of these men in the 40s decade, they're going through an identity crisis partially because they realize what a failure they've been. I've seen a lot of men in their 40s where maybe they have a kid or something, and he starts to realize, oh, wait a minute, I'm a dusty father. I'm a bad father. I was a bad husband. I was the 50-50 man. Oh shit, I was the one that was abusive to my son. So this is when they go through that phase of regret. That's why people call it a midlife crisis. Because a lot of men, they finally wake up and realize, oh my God, I totally screwed up. So then oftentimes you'll see some of them like lash out even more. Some of them just have this mindset where it's like, okay, fuck it, like I give up on life. And so then they just blow all their money, they spend it all on strippers and stuff. And then you'll get the young 20s women. That's where the young 20s women can make their bags. Because they're like, yes, this man, he just wants to have a good time for once. So let me just give him a good time and then get my money and then bounce. But This is a regret phase. So men start realizing that they missed out on things. So he realizes, oh my God, I never traveled the world. I never got to start my business. I never purchased the properties I wanted to purchase. This is not where I envisioned myself at 49 years old. I thought I'd be rich by now. I thought I'd have a wife by now. I thought that I would still have my hair. So some of these men, they will try to reclaim their youth. That's another reason why you'll see a lot of men in their 40s coming after you if you are a younger woman, maybe in your 20s, 30s, because they'll actually tell you, you make me feel young again. You make me feel alive again. Okay, well, that tells me that he doesn't feel young and alive by himself. So he feels dead and old. He feels dead or he feels old, like he wasted time when he's by himself. So that's why you see a lot of men in their 40s and in their 50s as well, kind of like Will Smith. They're kind of seeking out a way to fit in with a younger crowd. It's because they're in that regret phase. They're trying to reclaim their youth. They wish they could start over in a lot of cases. So their body doesn't bounce back like it used to. They're gaining weight like crazy. This is when the health issues start to pile up. So it's not just erectile dysfunction. Now it's, oh crap, he's had allergies his whole life. Oh, he's got some issues with his gut. He's got IBS. He's got all these different things going on. His teeth are damn near gone by now. And so this is when you start to see the men suddenly caring about healthcare, and suddenly he cares about politics. Suddenly he cares about the state of the world. Suddenly he realizes how everything intertwines together. Number 5, his isolation gets worse. So if he did not build strong male friendships, or if he has a child, let's say he has a son, and he totally effed up with his son, well, now his son is going no contact with him. Or in the 40s, that's also for the men who have a kid, or they have several kids, guess what? That's when that college bill starts coming in. So it's like, oh, you don't want your son to be a loser like you? Then, sir, you're going to have to pay for your son to go to college. Otherwise, he's just going to stay right there in the hood with his single mother like he has been for the past 18 years. And again, this is not just for black men. This is for men of all different races. Remember, 87% of men are making less than 100K. So this is when the men in their 40s who are making less than 100K, he's making 60K, 50K, 70K, 85. Now he has to deal with paying for his children's college tuition. So sometimes you'll see men in their 40s going through a lot of emotional turmoil with their children because, they're kind of arguing back and forth. Hey, you can't go to university because I can't afford it. You have to go to community college. You have to go to online school. So now he feels like shit because he essentially has to shrink his child's dreams. He has to shrink his son's dreams. He has to put down his own son and convince his son that he doesn't need to go to a prestigious university and that he can make it in a trade school as a mechanic, or he can make it just going to the local online school, when we know damn well that's not how society works. But because he can't afford it because of his own failures, now the child is being affected by that. And so that's why I call this the regret decade, because he starts to realize how his failures are affecting the next generation. He realizes how his failures affected his exes. He starts to realize how much he hurt his exes. Also, by a man's 40s, by his 40s, he's been played before. So he may have started off as a player in his 20s. He may have felt like he was the prize, he was the popular guy. So maybe he spent his 20s and 30s terrorizing women. Then by the time he gets in his 40s, now he's being played by women in their 20s. Now he's being played by women in their 30s. He's being used for money. Maybe he's being used for certain things. He's being treated like a dog now. So it's almost like that dating karma kind of comes back to bite him in the ass. So a lot of these men in their 40s, they're starting to feel stuck. So this is when you'll see them start to do all this risky behavior. Okay, so that's another way that they hit the wall. He's hitting the wall because he's at a financial wall because he has to pay child support now, or he has to help his children with their college tuition. So every other weekend for the past 18 years, he's been busy visiting the children. Hopefully, if he was a present father, then every other weekend he spent all that time visiting the children, which hindered his dating life and his sex life. So now he's got a big corn addiction. And then he doesn't have money because now he's spending a lot of his money on OnlyFans and on Pornhub and, fancy strip clubs and stuff so that he can feel young. So he's engaging in all this risky behavior, doing sex tourism, going to Dominican Republic or all these different places so he can feel like a man and sleep with all these prostitutes So now he doesn't have the savings to pay for his children's tuition. So this is when he's going through that stage of regret. And then he's also looking in the mirror. He's got grays everywhere. He's completely bald by now. This is when you start to see men getting those toupees and the man weaves. So he's in the bathroom spraying on glue, trying to put on his toupee. He's trying to put on his man unit. The same lace fronts that they used to make fun of women for wearing. Well, now he snuck over to the beauty supply, he snuck over to the barber shop, or he went online and he ordered some raw bundles, and maybe he got a toupee custom made and it's undetectable. So he's at home with his lace glue, looking in the mirror at his wrinkled face and his yellowed teeth, wondering where the time has gone, wondering how he's going to pay for his child's tuition, wondering how he's going to be able to pay to purchase a house. Because a lot of men in their 40s, especially if he was a loser in his 20s and 30s, this is when you start to see men getting desperate to purchase a property. Once they hit around 40, because think about it, if you're 40 years old, if he's 40 and he's living in an apartment and driving a trash can car and he has no real career, oh, that's undeniable loser status to everybody when it comes to dating. So this is when you'll see the men starting to get desperate, like, oh shit, I gotta fix my credit. You know, they're hiring credit cleaners now. They're paying money out of pocket to get somebody to like send letters to the credit bureau to try to get stuff erased off their credit. They're watching all these videos on YouTube. They're trying to find some ways to get housing. He might even switch careers. Maybe he will become a teacher. Maybe he will go into the army or something. One of those jobs where the benefit is they will help you to purchase a house. So that's when you see men start to get really desperate, like, oh shit, I got to get a property. I need to have some marker of success. So this is when they're desperately trying to purchase a property. So he purchases the house way outside of the city because that's all he could afford. So he's living 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 hours outside of the city, out in Timbuktu. He's living out in bumfuck North Carolina because he was so desperate to have a sense of identity and success. He just got whatever house he could afford. So he's living in a dumpster house. He got a fixer-upper out in the country somewhere so that he can go and brag about that in the sports bars. So he'll drive into town. These are the men who drive into town on the weekend. You know, they go and lurk in the clubs. They go and lurk on dating apps. They put it in their IG bios and stuff. Oh, I'm a homeowner. Because he doesn't have any other titles to put under his name. He's not a PhD. He doesn't have a bachelor's degree. He's not even a present father. Maybe he wasn't a present husband, so now he's divorced. Maybe he's been divorced several times. Maybe he's had a series of a whole bunch of breakups. So oftentimes they'll be like maybe desperate to buy a home, or they become extremely desperate to find a 50-50 woman. So at this point, this is when you'll start to see them say, look, I don't care how old she is. I don't care what she looks like. I don't care how many kids she has. I need a woman to come in here and pay 50-50 with these bills. So this is when you see the extreme simping behavior starting to happen. So what they'll do in their 40s oftentimes is they will try to go after a particular woman. Usually it's a smart woman. They love to target the intellectual women. They target the intellectual women who are maybe young and up and coming, or in some cases they will target the cougars. Believe it or not, I've seen a lot of men in their 40s actually targeting cougars. They want the women in their 50s, 60s, 70s, the women who have already retired. The quote-unquote ugly women, the same women that they rejected in their 20s, the same ones where they're like, oh, I don't like weaves, I don't like fat women, I don't like baby mamas, I don't like women from the ghetto, I don't like women with no teeth. Oh, no. Now they like all of those women, as long as they have money. Because that's when the extreme codependency kicks in. So he's like, look, I don't care what she looks like, as long as she goes 50-50, or as long as I can move in with her. So that's when you see these same men who used to play women. They were tormenting women for the past decades. And now suddenly, he has had a change of heart. Suddenly, he wants marriage immediately. He's looking for his wife. Suddenly, he becomes a romantic man. He starts buying women flowers. He starts sending women love letters. He starts going on dating apps. He's over here writing songs for women, playing his guitar outside of their front porch. He becomes super romantic. And oftentimes these men will even start to target single mothers as well. Because again, the same women that these men refused to date back when they had all their hair, back when they had muscle mass, back when they had all their teeth, they didn't want to date women with kids. But now that they've lost everything, now that life has ripped them a new one, I'm trying so hard to take this seriously. But now that life has ripped them a new one, now suddenly he's like, oh no, I'll date a woman with 5 kids. Oh, she's a doctor and she has 5 kids? Oh, no problem. She's making money. So that's when you'll see these men. They're usually very poor. They've blown away their life savings or they don't have one. As a matter of fact, sometimes you will see men clear out their life savings so they can appear more wealthy. Sometimes they'll do that. They'll clear out their 401k. They're clearing out their retirement so they can buy a Rolls Royce. They're clearing out, they're taking an equity loan. They're taking equity out of their house so they can, impress women with money. And then once they got that woman locked in, you'll also see some of them trying to impregnate other women, like younger women and stuff, because they're hoping that it'll emotionally attach that woman to him. Or they'll target these up-and-coming professional women, and they'll try to maybe impregnate them, maybe hurry up and marry this woman. So they'll do anything. They'll become the ultimate Mr. Perfect 2.0 for a few years so that they can lock somebody in, especially if she's got a lot of potential, she's got a lot of things going for herself. That's when they try to lock that woman in so that they can be financially solidified. Another thing that happens in the 40s is unrealized dreams. So the gap between fantasy and reality starts to set in. He thought he was going to be with the supermodel. He was calling women adjustable sixes. He was talking about women are going to die alone. Now he's facing the possibility of dying alone. So the same names that he used to call women, fat, ugly, bald-headed, the same names that he used to call them, that's him now. He used to talk about women having wrinkles. Well, his wrinkles are way worse than the women in his age group because on average, women are way better at taking care of ourselves than men. So sometimes what happens is he may have a spiritual awakening. So suddenly he becomes this, he's a super zen. He's a man that's into yoga all of a sudden, or, he's into African spirituality now. He doesn't care about your looks. He cares about your soul. So basically he drops all of his superficial standards. He drops all of his standards for that so that he can attain a woman with more financial stability than him. And then once he gets her, of course, he's going to utilize that so that he has money to now build himself up and cheat. This is something that happens all the time. They'll get the Build-A-Bear woman, they'll get the Barbara the Builder type of woman. Or maybe they will hurry up and marry another middle-aged woman who's just, maybe she's a single mom and she's just desperate for her children to have a father figure. So that's another thing. A lot of these men who screwed up, maybe he screwed up as a father with his first family. And so now he's targeting single mothers and he's marketing himself as, I'm going to do a better job this time. I don't care if you have these kids, just let me move in with you and your kids and then we'll work it out. I'll be a great stepfather to your kids. So this is when he's trying to do the redo. This is also, in the 40s, this is when men start circling back around. They start going back and DMing their high school crushes. This is when they start DMing their college crushes. The same ones that they dogged out a couple decades ago, yeah, they're hoping that she has forgotten about that. So I've seen that behavior a lot from men in their 40s. They want to circle back around. They're trying to spin the block first. That's always their first option because they're like, look, I already know that I'm fat, I'm ugly, I'm bald, I'm broke. Nobody else will want me. So maybe I can try to spin the block with a woman who did want me at one point because she views me differently because she knew me in my prime. And now I'm just down and out. So maybe I can just convince her that, hey, I'm a different man now. I'm down and out. Let me get back in your life. So that's why you see a lot of these men circling back around in their 40s during that midlife crisis period. They try to go back to their ex-wife, go back to baby mama number 1, go back to baby mama number 2. They're in that phase of wanting to redo it because they know that they screwed up and now they have no stability. Let's get into 50s and beyond. This is the legacy or regret era. So this is when his health starts to really dominate the conversation because this is when he starts needing surgery. This is when he starts having chronic conditions. So a lot of people believe in the concept of like psychosomatic illnesses. So if his nervous system was already fucked up, his emotional state was already screwed, he's got horrible relationships with all of his family members, this is when you start to see the diagnoses pile up. So now he's overwhelmed with medical bills at this point. So he signs up for Medicaid. He tries to go get the free health care. He starts hanging out at the senior center. He starts hanging out at the local, the neighborhood, like YMCA or whatever. He starts hanging out around the retirees because at this point, he's like, look, I don't even know how much time I got left. And I know that there are different death rates for men depending on their background and stuff. But this is when all of the romantic stuff, a lot of times it begins to go out the window. That's the last thing that these men are thinking about in some cases. Because a lot of times they're just thinking about their basic stability. Like, am I going to even live to see another day? So this is when you see the depression really start to kick up a notch. This is when you see that the children, they're really cutting contact. Maybe they had patience for him when he was in his 40s. So about 10 years ago, when his kids were in their early 20s, they had more patience. But now those kids are in their 30s. Now those kids know what narcissism is. Now those kids know what codependency is. They know what PTSD and anxiety are. And so now those children, they're no longer tolerating that cranky behavior that parent had their entire life. They're not tolerating that from dad anymore. So that's when you really start to see the kids go no contact. And then you will see the career plateau or retirement anxiety. So this is when a lot of men start to face ageism. So maybe he was a star mechanic when he was in his 20s and 30s. Maybe he was the best construction worker. He was doing all the overtime hours. He was an overseer. Maybe he was doing all this cool stuff. But now his back is thrown out. He's got knee problems now. So he's at a career plateau. He's starting to face ageism in the workplace. He's Generation X. He's a boomer. He's from the silent generation, so he's not familiar with AI and all the new tech stuff. So again, you've got him playing catch up. He's trying to catch up with the 25-year-olds. He's trying to catch up with everything. So if his identity was tied to his career, he feels like, hey, I'm not going to have this career anymore. And then especially with retiring, a lot of men are actually scared of retiring because they feel like they would have no purpose anymore. Because they're like, look, what else do I have besides my job working down at the power plant? What else do I have besides my job working down at the gas station? Working down at the call center? What else do I have in life? I don't have anything. And then also this is where you see the dating difficulty gets even worse, especially for divorced men. Maybe he's had several divorces. Maybe he's had several baby mamas at this point. He's had several children cut contact with him. He's been fired several times. He has, he starts things and never finishes them. So maybe he was going to be a CEO, but then he didn't start the business. He was going to graduate college, but then he never did. He was going to have a property, but he screwed up his finances and his credit. So he doesn't have status on his side. He doesn't have health on his side. And also a lot of men who are 50s and beyond feel invisible in youth culture. So if that same man, if he was used to getting attention 30 years ago, especially from women, he feels like he's fading away now. So, women used to stare at him and be like, oh my God, he's so cute. Oh, he's so hot. Oh, look at his hair. Look at his muscles. Oh my God, I have a crush on him. But this man, 50s and beyond, oh, a woman hasn't had a crush on him in decades. If anything, women have crushes on his bank account. That's about it. But 87% of men make less than 100K. So, that's not really enough for women to really have a crush on. And if they are having a crush on that, usually these are these are kind of poor young women. So women in their 20s who are poor, maybe they really care about that. Like, oh, he makes 60K. This 55-year-old guy, he makes 60K. Oh my God, that's so much. Well, yeah, she's in college or she's young with no kids. She has low expenses. So maybe that will impress her for a year or two. But for a lot of these men, they feel very invisible when it comes to youth culture. So all that bullshit they were talking, oh, I'm going to get a woman that's 30 years younger than me. Now you got to pay for her attention. So go on and head on over to the ATM. Go ahead and get those ones out. And you can go down to the local strip club. Go ahead and take out that card. And you can tip the waitress at Hooters. Because that's the only way that these men are even getting attention. They have to pay for women to look at them. So this is also when their mortality becomes real. Their friends are dying. Their parents are dying. He becomes the old guy in the room once he hits senior citizen age. Okay, so that's why you see a lot of women saying, oh, you should just marry an old white man. Okay, that's actually like low-key an insult. Because you're basically saying, go get a man who's essentially an incel in his community. Go get a man who has been rejected by others and rejected by society so many times that he has no choice but to be with you. Because that's what happens for about 87% of men. They're making an average income, they're going to look average, and they're going to have the average experience of aging, which comes with health problems, high medical bills, maybe children that they end up going no contact with. Maybe they purchase a house and then all of their expenses are going into the house. That's another thing. A lot of men around 40s and 50s who do have properties, they are house poor. So they've got a house and nothing else. They've got a house and an empty bank account. They got a house and no furniture in the house. They have a house and it's falling apart. They can't afford to get the AC fixed. He's making an average income. He's making less than 100K. Or if he does get something fixed, he's going into more debt. So he's making high monthly payments. He's got to make monthly payments to get the AC fixed. He had to make monthly payments to that plumber. He has to make payments to get these appliances, a new refrigerator, a new stove, a new toilet. So that's house poor. He's house poor. He has the house and then all of his money is going towards maintaining the house. So that's when you see men do some extreme isolation. This is also when you hear men start to talk about glorified homelessness. They're like, oh, let me just go live off the grid and let me just go live in the field somewhere and then just go pee in a pot and then I'll just sleep outside on the grass. And, I'm a minimalist. So that's when you'll see men, they start becoming minimalists and they start trying to get solar panels on their house and stuff. They're doing everything they can to make sure that their bills go down, or they want to live in a trailer at this point. Maybe they want to build a tiny house or something, or they want to live out in a tree house in the woods because they don't want to have the expenses because they can't keep up with them. So those are all of the ways that men hit the wall. A lot of men are starting off on the wall, and don't even get me started on the mental health declines that a lot of men go through in old age. Because if he's an old man, he lives out in the woods by himself, he has no friends because he couldn't maintain his friendships, or he lives so far out in the country. He lives so far out in the middle of nowhere to where he literally can't make friends. He doesn't have any hobbies. He doesn't have anywhere to go. So this is why at the morgue, you see that a lot of the unidentified bodies, majority of them are men, because men on average tend to isolate a lot more. This is also why sometimes people say don't go on dating apps, because a lot of times the most isolated men are on dating apps, like the men that have no social skills. So they get a high just by talking to a woman. This is also why you see some of those men in comment sections online, or they're on Reddit pages complaining or berating women because they're mad. They're mad at themselves and they're mad about the women that they missed out on. Or in some cases, you'll see some of them flip to the other side and they'll be like, oh, actually I'm gay. Actually, you know what? I'm trans. I want to change into a woman now. So you'll see so many different transitions and changes with these men. But a lot of times, these men hit the wall just as much as, if not more than, women. But what do you ladies think? Let me know in the comment section, and I'll talk to you next time. Stay pretty, ladies.